Hello and welcome to the second recording of the Book of the Outlands, part 2, where I will be going over the vehicle rules, specifically the profiles and how you can use them in your gangs. For the main vehicle rules, you can check out the Ash Waste review, which has been previously on this channel. So I'm not going to cover ground that I've already tread. I'm pulling out my phone because I've got a gang list for you as an example of how you can do an all bike gang, and I'm also going to do a custom vehicle mashup as an example of the custom vehicle rules, which we'll also go into. So I'm going to start very simply with the mounted fighter rules, and then we're going to move into vehicle crews, the main vehicles, custom vehicles, and the example. Mounted fighter rules, these are the most simple ways of including Ash Waste vehicles into your gang. You get 400 creds to spend on vehicles in your initial gang list in the Outlands. So that's very easily 8 bikes. And bikes actually covers all mounts. So that's cyber horses, bikes, fleas, anything you can think of. I've actually seen some really good cyber horse conversions where people have stuck Eschers on the top doing Parthenon shots. Yeah, that gets you, with a mounted condition, movement 8. It comes with the benefit of only being pinned if you fail an initiative check once you've been shot at. So it's not quite as good as Spring Up, but it's better than Nerves of Steel, especially for Escher and Delac. It's better in your basic gangers as well, which are not likely to have a great cool value. However, if you fail this initiative check, you take damage based on how far you moved in your previous turn. So their 8-inch move, if you've only moved once, is a strength 5 damage 1 hit. If you've moved over 10 inches, I believe it is, you get strength 7 damage 2. So this can actually be devastating on the lower toughness gangs if you've already taken a flesh wound. So it is something to watch out for. Goliaths aren't going to be as scared, but everyone can start taking damage from this. It also lets you do drive-bys, so you can see this in my Ash Waste skirmish battle report where I played Aid and Matt Russell with the initial release of the Ash Waste box set. I had to think of it's not the Outlands box set, it's the Ash Waste box set. With that, how would you put bikes into your gang? And you go in either Sons of Anarchy style or Akira style, but more how would you put it into an actual gang? I've got my Orlock gang, which has been slightly tweaked from what I'm doing in the next campaign. I'll give you the list and tell you how it fits in as we go along. So I've got an Orlock road captain with a combi grenade launcher, a bit of range support on a bike. It's not going to have Nerves of Steel skill, can have something else, can immediately start taking the True Grit skill or Unstoppable. A road sergeant with combi melter on a bike, very good for getting into that melter range. He's going to get really up there, doesn't need to take the Nerves of Steel skill as much. Obviously Orlock's Nerves of Steel cool 6 is slightly better, but not as necessary, so it's a toss-up between them. Nerves of Steel or always just relying on a bike. Nerves of Steel and the bike, I suppose, makes them really hard to pin. I've then got an Arms Master with a stub gun, Arc Hammer, which is mastercrafted, and an undersuit to start off with. On a bike, again, Nerves of Steel style. He's going to be getting into combat much easier and can just drive-by attack someone with the Arc Hammer, which is mastercrafted, so re-rolling that 1 hit from the drive-by attack. Then I've got 3 Orlock gunners, one with a combat shotgun, close range, on the bike, suits it. 2 Orlock gunners with stub gun, with dum-dums and flails. Now, here is where it gets a bit interesting. Your drive-by attack is, I think, +1 to hit. +1 to hit. And then flails is an additional +1 to hit. So that's actually hitting on 2s with that single attack. So you can do your 16-inch move, go past someone and out the other side with the flail, hitting on 2s, and you're effectively strength 4 for that. So it gets really, really good to do these gangers, which are more combat orientated. A bike lets you get up there and into someone's face, like the bike gangs. I've then got 2 greenhorns, one with a sawn off, one with a stub gun. And that's just because the credits fit. on bikes again, and there you have it, a bike gang, really simple. They get also the tools of the trade, which for all of them, which means if they ever need to be off their bikes, they just are off their bikes, say like Zone Metalis style, or if it doesn't fit in with what the arbitrator's doing for your campaign for that week, you've not wasted any more creds on anything else, if you know what I mean. So, really easy way to get into the Ash Waste rules. It lets you play the rolling road scenarios, which I imagine we're all really hyped about. And that's how I would structure a gang as a really easy way to start. So going into the vehicle rules proper, you need to take vehicle crews rather than regular gang fighters. So looking at those, you have 3 types. You have, 4 types with the squat prospectors, but you can see those in my squat rundown. So sticking with just the generic vehicle crews, you've got Iron Riders, Scum Racers, and Guild of Coin. Now, Scum Racers are the cheapest at 20 credits. So the Scum Racers come with Ballistic Skill 4, Leadership 8, Cool 8, Willpower 8, Intelligence 8. And it's a really bad stat line, but you're only 20 credits. One thing to note is these don't have the gang fighter rule, which we'll come into in a second. So when you're equipping your gang, making your gang, writing your gang, they actually don't balance out your champions. So you will still need 4 regular gangers to balance out 4 champions, because these aren't counted in that. So going on to Orlock Iron Riders at 35 credits, these do have the gang fighter rule. And that means if you have 4 champions, you only need 3 gangers and then the vehicle crew to balance out and make that a legal gang, which I think is a real stealth benefit of these Orlock Iron Riders. Now the other benefits is you've got BS4, same. Now you've got Leadership 6, Cool 6, Willpower 7, Intelligence 7. And for the Orlocks, that increased stat line is great. The Cool especially is really good. Intelligence and Leadership never really seem to come into the game that much, but they're increased over. But I think for that 35 creds over 20, they're just, I think they are better. It's worth taking these as Orlocks for that gang fighter. You can get more champions and stuff into your gang. I really do rate them. But then again, I'm an Orlock fanboy, so take that with a pinch of salt. Then there's the Guild of Coin Hauler crew for 40 credits. And these are basically Orlock Iron Rider crew available to anyone for 5 more credits. Except they don't have the gang fighter rule. So they're not balancing out your champions in the same way as Scum Racers aren't balancing out your champions. They have Ballistic Skill 4, Cool 7, or Cool 6, Leadership 7, Will 6, Intelligence 7. Now these are the only things that can crew Ridge Haulers, and we'll get to that in the Ridge Hauler section. Any gang can take these for any vehicle. So there is that access to the better stat line for any gang, but just not as cheaply as Orlocks. So it fits the Orlocks being in the Ash Waste, the convoy runners, guards, and also bandits. I really like the flavour that adds. One thing that I would consider as an arbitrator is giving an increased stat line in some ways to say like Van Saar, Ballistic Skill 3 for more credits on your Scum Racers, better Cool on your Goliaths, things like that, though it would be very hard to give all the house gangs a unique flavour, so I sort of get it if people don't. All vehicle crews have the Savant secondary, shooting primary, driving primary. Pretty obvious. They can't infiltrate because they've not got cunning, obvious. They're not going to be in combat. So shooting, very good on vehicles because it's all about shooting. Driving, you're driving about. And Savant secondary is very interesting, but people don't tend to roll those secondary skills. Pretty much always better choosing a primary. So they also have equipment of weapons and wargear, auto pistol, hand flamer, las pistol, stub gun, and then filter plugs, photo goggles, respirator. For the weapons, the only one I'd really ever consider is the hand flamer, but it's still a bit expensive. And the reason for that is you sort of want your guys to be firing the vehicle's weapons, not their own pistol. They're not ever going to be dismounting unless you have your own campaign rules that allow them to dismount. So unless you have just like 10 creds spare that's going to be lost for some reason if you don't spend it, I wouldn't take these auto pistols, las pistols or stub guns. For the personal equipment, photo goggles is very good. Now, respirators and filter plugs, you're immune to a lot of the ash waste effects that require a fighter on foot to have a respirator or filter plugs. Yes, it makes you more survivable against gas weapons and things, but for the 15 or 10 creds, I think I'd just buy a more survivable vehicle, because the base vehicle isn't that expensive, and we'll get into that now as we move over to vehicles. The vehicles, we'll start with the Orlock Outrider quad. That is the first one you come into in the book, so I'll start with that. It's only Orlocks and requires Iron Rider crew, so it needs those more expensive Orlock crew. But why wouldn't you be taking them is my thought. It's movement 9, front toughness 4, side and rear 3, 2 hull points, handling 4, save 5. It's agile, so it can make 2 turns of 90 degrees rather than the usual one. It's got a dedicated gunner, so while performing a move and shoot basic action, the vehicle may move its full movement characteristic instead of half. But that comes with the downside of needing 2 crew. But the movement at full instead of half is actually really big. It allows you to utilise that speed of 9. You're getting about really easily. I like the handling number, especially when we get into the vehicle upgrades section, because there's things you can play with in that. With vehicle upgrades, you have 0 to the body, 1 drive, 2 engine. The drive, you have to pick between one of these. All-wheel steering and tyre claws, both for 10 creds, increase your handling by 1. I don't see where there'd be a difference in both of them. But when you get with 2 drive upgrades, you can take them both. So it's just a bit redundant in this entry. The redundant drive system, there's a bit of janky problems with that and how it words the rule. I wouldn't recommend it on anything unless your group comes up with something to clear it. In fact, I'll go into it. Basically, the redundant drive system means the first non-glancing hit to your drive counts as a glancing hit. Now, that definitely should be the first penetrating hit becomes a glancing hit. But the first hit could be a hit that does no damage, so you've now upgraded it to a glancing hit. And that's the same for all sort of these protection upgrades. It's just a bit of weird ruling that needs an arbitrator to step in and FAQ it before Games Workshop does, because it might be a while. Engine upgrades, easy turnover. I think your handling's good enough to be able to restart your engine without that. Gliss injector. Now this is 4 extra movement for 1 activation of the game. I think that's really good. So you've got Nitro Burner as the alternative upgrade. That's +1 movement at all times. But I think in that clutch situation, the additional 4 movement on a vehicle that's already fast is much more important than just +1 movement. The Wargear options, headlights and smoke launchers. Headlights, I'd probably just take photo goggles and not have a downside to illuminating yourself. Smoke launchers are actually really good. I'd always put them on vehicles whenever you can get them. So it's placing 3 markers within 2 inches of the vehicle that act as smoke grenades. And that can just shut down areas of the board for line of sight. So you can really manipulate that. And that's on most vehicles, in fact. And you can do that every turn. It's not something that runs out. So I think it's really powerful. It's worth putting on. It can save your light vehicle especially, but it can also manipulate what other people are doing with their gangs. Heavy weapons, harpoon launcher and heavy bolter. I think they actually lost heavy stubber from the ash waste box pamphlet. So it's lucky that I didn't make one with a stubber. Sorry everyone that did. The harpoon launcher is really flavourful. It's not that great though. Heavy stubber are obviously really powerful, but can run out of ammo. Maybe that's where your las pistols and stuff come in, but really I just want to drive off if that's the case. I think some different upgrades to keep them useful would be necessary. So onto the Wolf quad, and this can be taken by anyone, including Orlocks. I initially thought, why would you ever take a Wolf quad as Orlocks when you can already take the Outrider? But I think you would after reading the rules. It's movement 8, so 1 less than the quad. Front, side, rear 3, 2 hull points, 5 handling, save 5. So it's worse handling by 1, worse front armour by 1. It's got the agile rule, so it's 2 turns of 90. I've never seen that actually come into it yet in my test games. So I've never been too disadvantaged by the amount you can turn by any vehicle. It's wheeled like the Wolf quad. It's got 1 weapon hardpoint, so it can only move half and fire when it doesn't move and fire, but doesn't require that second expensive crew. So it keeps it a lot cheaper than the Orlock Outrider. It's got 1 body slot, 1 drive, 2 engine. So the body slot is reinforced armour and speed fins. Speed fins give you +1 movement in the body slot, which is good when you can combine it with other engine upgrades. Reinforced armour is, I believe, +1 hull point. And I think it's quite good on the Wolf Quad to give it 3 hull points. So yeah, it is, in fact, I'm remembering it correct, it's +1 hull point. Then drive upgrades, all-wheel steering. I think that's really good. It's only 10 credits, it increases your handling. Emergency brake. You've only got 1 drive slot. I'd go for all-wheel steering over emergency brake. It's got smoke vents for the engine upgrade, so -1 to hit. Easy turnover. Your handling's good enough, I'd say. Nitro burner. Now, nitro burner is +1 move. And this stacks quite well with the speed fins to then get 10 movement, because you can't get that gliss injector like the Orlock Quad does. So 10 movement is actually really good for only an additional 25 creds over the Wolf Quad's standard cost. Weapons, heavy flamer, heavy stubber, mining laser. And I think the mining laser is where it comes into it at strength 9, because you start cracking those heavier vehicles. Even your heavy bolters, as Orlocks on the Outrider Quad, might struggle to crack. It lets you wound a ridge hauler on a 4-up with its toughness 9, which is really useful. So then, going back a page to the medium vehicle, the Ridge Runner. So the Ridge Runner is movement 7, front 5, side 4, rear 4, 3 hull points, handling 7, save 5 up. It's wheeled, has 2 body slots, 3 drive slots, 2 engine slots. Now this has speed fins, so there's +1 movement, escape hatches. Escape hatches allow you to re-roll your crew's lasting injury, which is really useful. And you've got 2 body slots, so you can do both of those. The crash cage is something that allows you to change the first hit to a glancing, which has the problems that I talked about before. Drive upgrades, all-wheel steering, emergency brake, tyre claws, redundant drive system. All-wheel steering and tyre claws, I'd say, are good, because they're plus handling, which your handling's only 7, which is getting into the jankier range when we're all used to the quads from the Ashways set. Redundant drive, the same as crash cage, the glancing hit thing, worth it if that gets errated or your campaign is doing that. Engine upgrades, engine shell, same as redundant drive and crash cage. Nitro burner +1 move, but the real standout one for the Ridge Runner is in fact the gas Promethium engine. I'm really struggling to say these words. We were just in a sweatbox in the studio today, which is, I think, 28 degrees, did we say before? 28 degrees, and that's the outside temperature and it's boiling in here. So the gas Promethium engine, so it makes a 1-inch bubble around your Ridge Runner when you move. And anything within 1 inch when you move, it takes a strength 3 hit at -1 AP with the blaze trait. So you can actually blaze past people, setting them on fire with your Promethium engines, which is really, really cool. It can affect your own guys, but I'd say that's my favourite upgrade out of the entire book, in fact. It can be equipped with mining laser, missile launcher, mortar, or twin-linked heavy stubber. Now here, the option between the mining laser and missile launchers, I'd say, are the best. I think the missile launcher pips it, even though it's more expensive, because the option to fire a 5-inch blast with the frag missile, as well as the high-strength crack missile, to me is more useful than the mining laser. I know it's strength 9, it only loses 1 strength to go to a crack missile. It matters on the front of a Ridge Runner, but everywhere else, it's not making that much of a difference. So it doesn't have smoke launchers, which is a really big downside, I would say. But it has headlights, flare launchers, kill switch. Not as good as the smoke launchers, but there you go. You can't have everything. So then the Rock Grinder, for 145 credits. You've got 5-inch movement, front side 7, rear 6, 4 hull points, handling 8, save 4+. Now on this, it's got a rear platform transport area, so that's something where your guys don't fall or have to take initiative checks when they're climbing over the top of a vehicle in a high-speed chase, which means you can put, say, like a crew riding around in the back, firing using it as a mobile gun platform. You've got 2 weapons hardpoints, one on top and one on the rear, 3 body upgrade slots, 3 drive, 3 engine. The standout ones here are the Rock Grinder Ram, which gives you an additional 2 strength, AP and damage when you do a ram. You can give ablative armor, which is +1 toughness, which I would recommend to this. Going to 8 toughness on the side and front is really good, 7 on the rear, really good. Pneumatic radials on the drive upgrades for 30 credits. It means you ignore the speed loss of difficult terrain, which anything off the road is really big for. So I'd go for that near immediately. And then I'd go for things like tire claws here. The smoke vents for -1 to hit makes the vehicle a real tank for 25 credits, stand out there. Weapons, twin linked autocannon. Now I really like this because it's high strength and rapid fire. It's higher than the heavy bolter. It's not near being doubled out. If a ridge hauler takes ablative armor, they're then toughness 10, which means a heavy bolter is wounded on 6s, whereas the autocannon will always be 5s, which is big, and you've got that reroll to hit. Wargear, but you also can get the mining laser there, but I just like the autocannon for its versatility and more shots, because it means you have more chances to do more damage. Vehicle Wargear, smoke launchers are there, so as we said before, smoke launchers can manipulate where people can see unless they've got photo goggles, and it's a really good upgrade. As we all know, smoke is really useful in Necromunda. Onto the Guild of Coin Ridge Hauler. Now, although any gang can take a Ridge Hauler, it can only be driven by Guild of Coin employees. So it's movement 7, front 9, side and rear 8, 6 hull points, handling 7, save 3 up. So it's really survivable. It's got 4 upgrade slots on all locations. It's got 1 weapon hardpoint on the cab, and that can be upgraded when you get trailers with containers on. Now this is something I'd really watch out for in campaigns as the arbitrator. And I'm going to talk more about why that is than I actually am about the Ridge Hauler itself, because you'll be able to look at it and get a feel based on the rest of the review. And the more important thing to talk about here is the amount of creds this starts bringing in to the campaign is something to really to watch out for. It can mean that if someone invests into these Ridge Haulers, they can start massively outstripping the rest of the campaign. The Ridge Hauler as a base adds 1d3 times 10 creds to the controlling player's stash for each cargo load the Ridge Hauler and its trailers have. And that's just as a base. It doesn't have to upgrade to get a cargo load. If the opposing gang wrecks the Ridge Hauler, they get d6 times 10 for each cargo load. Now this is massive. That's a lot of credits because you can have up to 4 trailers and the Ridge Hauler. A Prometheum tank, which is a 30 credit upgrade, then adds d6 times 10 credits in addition to this to the controlling player if the vehicle participated and isn't wrecked when the battle ends. So it's a potential 5 Prometheum tanks, 400, 500 credits a game, that is potential. Now, it's very expensive to do that, but in investing into this Ridge Hauler, the player is putting all their eggs in one basket, and that can lead to the situation that if they lose the Ridge Hauler by other people putting their credits into destructive things, it can just wipe them out of the campaign. It's like the real feel-bad moment. But if that doesn't happen to them, they don't get their massive investment ganked, they can just spiral massively out of control in the campaign. Like, you can start with a Ridge Hauler with crew and start getting those creds from game 1 and just build it up. And it's quite a flavourful thing to do, but there is that chance that it's going to get ganked and your campaign is over, or very likely to be over, unless you've got very tight arbitrator boosts and controls on everything. So what I'd recommend doing actually is removing some of the creds from that, possibly making it cheaper, but mainly using it as an arbitrator tool for rolling road scenarios, for people coming stealing things from the Ridge Hauler, or giving it to a player which is behind in the campaign for a campaign cycle, just one game or one like 3 games in a cycle or something, just to boost those, rather than having it as this purchased thing. That's what I think about the Ridge Hauler. I really like it as a vehicle. I love the model. I just think it's got the potential and balancing of feel bad moments that I... So then onto the make your own vehicle. And I'm going to go over these more broadly before getting into what makes them unique, which is the greater access to upgrades. You have the light vehicle chassis, medium vehicle, and heavy vehicle. All of these are actually slightly worse than the pre-built like Ridge Hauler, Quad, Wolf Quads, and Rock Grinder for their credits. And they're also jerry-rigged, which means that it's double the credit cost to repair them. And I think this has been put in as some sort of balancing mechanism for whatever mental combinations that we can all come up with to break the game, which I'm not against, actually. I really think that's a good mechanism for Games Workshop to do it. You create your own things, have all the design freedom that you as players want, but it's slightly more expensive. The actual upgrades that we'll get into should probably start it off with the types of locomotion. So all of these vehicles can start off as either wheeled vehicles or tracked. Wheeled vehicles have the base movement, so say the light vehicle will be movement 7, so that's 1 less than a quad, but it counts every 1 inch of difficult terrain as 2 inches. Tracked vehicles, on the other hand, have -1 to the movement that's listed in the design section. So light vehicles will be movement 6, but they count difficult terrain as open. And that's really big. I actually think a lot of the time you'll be going faster in tracked vehicles off the road, because the road only features a narrow strip, and a lot of the ash waste conditions are difficult terrain when it's off the road. Tracked are actually possibly faster, so I just like the look of wheeled vehicles a bit more, though half tracks, which aren't actually in this, they've been a tease today of a Goliath half track, and I really hope that type of vehicle will be translated over to the full generic design template, because who doesn't love a half track? Next, as an upgrade, comes the skimmer, and that can be given to any tracked or wheeled vehicle. Strangely, you can't actually start with that. It has to be bought from the trading post. It's something I'd actually allow as an arbitrator or campaign tyrant for the players to be able to start with skimmers, especially as Van Saar, which already have skimmer tech in the form of hoverboards. Van Saar actually get reduced rarity of skimmer tech. It's 50 credits, so there's actually a big downside, and it allows you to move over dangerous and difficult terrain freely. However, if you end in dangerous or difficult, you must make a handling check. If failed, you suffer an immediate catastrophic hit to your drive, which is really big. So I would allow that as the arbitrator to start with that. It's 50 credits. Don't know why you can't, but there we go. Finally, there's the walker type, and this is a bit head scratching. You can't buy the walker type, as I can see, for the medium or heavy vehicles. It's stuck in this Sentinel profile, which is movement 5, side, front, rear 3, hull points 2, handling 4, save 5, which feels a bit weird. Why can you not have this big stompy robot like Wild Wild West style in your gang? And it's possibly something to look at as an arbitrator to add that into the heavy vehicles and medium vehicle stat lines. Now, what the walker trait actually does is for every move that you can make as many turns as you wish. However, for every 1 inch you move through difficult terrain, you count as having moved 2, and you can't use some upgrades. So it's like a wheeled vehicle in that you have your movement through difficult terrain, but you can make as many turns as you want. You're also going to be slower than a wheeled vehicle, so that's something to look at, balancing the medium and heavy vehicles to being even slower if they are walkers. Although these come with a custom vehicle equipment list, I'm going to go over all of the list so that you guys can form your own opinions of these upgrades, not in a vacuum, so that you can see what you want to save your hard points for later when you're just buying from the trading post. So yeah, I think it's better to just go through all of them. So ablative armor, first non-glancing hit in each battle counts as a glancing hit. We've sort of gone over that a bit before. It needs an errata. I think it should just be penetrating hit counts as a glancing hit. All-wheel steering, increased handling characteristic by 1. The upgrade cannot be taken by a vehicle that is a skimmer or a walker. Fair, it needs wheels basically to do that. Or tracks, I suppose. Anti-grav generators, this makes you a skimmer. Yeah, you can't start with it. It takes up the engine upgrade, or one of the engine upgrade slots. I think it's got its downsides, obviously, but I think I'd allow people to start with it. And that's more of a flavourful thing. I don't think there's mass benefits of that over other vehicles like tracked, near ignoring, difficult and dangerous. Tracked, I think, is actually better than skimmer because it doesn't require a handling check and you just ignore the terrain. Archaeotech automatic reactor. Jeez. I say that a lot in Heresy and I still can't say it. So you increase the movement characteristic by 2 inches. When the vehicle is wrecked, it explodes. All models within 3 inches suffer a strength 5, AP -1, damage 1 hit, and the vehicle is then removed. Now this is really good. It only takes up 1 slot to get those 2 additional movement. Yeah, I don't actually think the automatic reactor is too much of a negative, and I think combining the speed increases of 2 inches into 1 slot is really big. I think that's one of the better ones for speed increase. Crash cage, glancing hit, miswording again. I think all of these are good so long as that gets cleared up. Easy turnover. A vehicle fitted for easy turnover applies a +1 modifier to any checks to restart its engine. Now this is much better for the heavier vehicles which have worse handling. And you might be saying obviously, but one of the main reasons I think that is because light vehicles have less hard points with which to play with. So this becomes at the end of a list that you want to be putting other things into. Emergency brake, when it moves due to a failed loss of control test, half the distance travelled. I'm a bit of a gambler, I'd skip it, let it careen out of the way, let it maybe run over someone else's ganger, maybe it runs over yours. It's just a chance that I'd take. Engine shell, first glancing hit to the engine, non-glancing counts as a glancing, needs clearing up. Escape hatches. When rolling on lasting injury for the crew, you may re-roll the result and it must be kept if it's worse than the first. I think this is really, really good. It's in contention for one of the best ones. You don't want your crew dying. You don't want them getting worse stats. This saves you money as your vehicles get destroyed. I think it's worth it. Explosive ram. It's the first time you have a head-on collision, the other object suffers a strength 5, AP -2, damage 2 hits in addition to other effects. I think there's better things to ram people with. And I'm really in favour of ramming things. Like, it's one of the key things of having a vehicle is running people over, ramming into other structures. This isn't the thing that I take, and we'll get there. Extra armour, increased toughness by 1 in all locations. Now, I think this is actually best for the heaviest vehicles you can put it on and the lightest. The lightest are really going to benefit by small arms, wounding them on harder results. So like, if you go from toughness 3 to toughness 4, that's really big because it means that las guns go from wounding you on 4s to 5s. It means that shotguns wound you on 4s rather than 3s. And I also think it's really good for the higher toughness things, like when it can go on a ridge hauler, because that makes you toughness 10 on the front and 9 on the sides. And that makes you near untouchable to a lot of things. That it means that heavy bolters go from wounding you on 5s to 6s. Gas Promethium engine. This is where if you move any models within 1, take a hit with the blaze trait. Excellent. I love this one. One of my favourite upgrades. Really, really Mad Max style. Put it on your fast vehicles, put it on your slow vehicles, put it on everything that you possibly can. Gliss Injector. Now, I'll go over this with there's 3 movement ones in a row. Gliss Injector, increase movement by 4 for 1 activation. Nitro Burner, increase movement by 1 for all battle. Plasma Coil Engine, increase movement by 2 when you want to turn it on. So you can do this every turn. But on a D6 roll of a 1, the vehicle overheats and it loses 1 HP. Now, these are all engine upgrades. And I actually think the Gliss Injector is really good for that clutch moment. The Nitro Burner is better on slow vehicles, and the plasma coil engine is better if you're a gambler. That's just the best one if you're a gambler. I really like the plasma coil engine because it can go horribly wrong. The Gliss Injector I really like on fast vehicles because it gives you that big boost when you really need it. So I think they're each applicable in their own way. Well, I suppose that's just good game design. They're each good for a different type of vehicle, except the plasma coil engine is just good overall, and it's the most expensive one, so it makes you have to think about putting it on there. So yeah, I think those are all really good upgrades. Nitro burner, especially on like a walker or heavy vehicle. Pneumatic radials. A vehicle fitted with pneumatic radials doesn't suffer a penalty for traversing difficult terrain. It can only be taken by wheeled vehicles. This is key. If you can get that on a wheeled vehicle, it's better than, I think, any speed upgrade you can put on there. Because it means that when you go off-road, which you'll be doing a lot, you don't slow down. And that's really, really key. I can't stress that enough. When you go through difficult terrain, not slowing down is massive. Powered steering, you can perform 2 turns of 90 degrees before, during, or after the move rather than just one. I've never struggled with the amount of turns. I think skip this one, but if you were playing, I'd say on more terrains, but I try to do really heavy terrain battlefields whenever I can, and I've still not run into it. I've not played a rolling road yet, so that's maybe where this can come in, where you get stuck into a motion, and then, though you're still 90 degrees, you can turn a lot. I don't think this will come into it. Next, ram. And I'll go over ram and rock grinder ram at once. The ram, for 15 creds, adds 1 to the strength, AP and damage of any vehicle impact involving its front arc. The rock grinder ram adds 2 to the strength, AP and damage in the front arc. They're both body upgrades. The rock grinder ram is 40 credits, the ram is 15 credits. Now there's nothing that says you can't put both on there. So what I think I'd be doing is putting both on there and getting +3 to strength, AP and damage. And that's why I think that's better than the explosive ram, because you're massively increasing the damage output that you can put out. The redundant drive system, the first non-glancing hit to the drive counts as a glancing hit. We know the score with this one by now. It needs an errata. It's good if it gets one. Smoke vents. The vehicle gets -1 to hit penalty, as in like things shooting at the vehicle get -1 to hit. Really good. It makes everything more survivable. Put it on there when you can. It takes up an engine slot. If you're not putting any increased movement on there, I'd use smoke vents. In fact, it's probably the first one I'd put on there. Pneumatic radials are in drive, so that doesn't conflict. So if you just want the fastest thing around that's also survivable, you don't have to skip the smoke vents. Speed fins, +1 movement. Now, the speed fins actually come as body upgrades, so this can be combined with the other speed upgrades. If you're really going for the fastest thing you possibly can, you can do a wolf quad. Let me get there now. A wolf quad has 1 body, so that's speed fins. 1 drive, which I'd say pneumatic radials, and then you've got 2 engine. So you could go either plasma coil for the +2, and then Gliss Injector for +4 1 turn, or nitro burner, plasma coil, speed fins for 10 movement all the time, +2 if you gamble on that D6 roll of a 1. The tyre claws, +1 to handling. This is something that I go backwards and forwards with. I think it's really useful on the heavier vehicles, which are getting up to like handling 7 or 8, because it gets you into that much more comfortable range on 2d6, like your average rolls. It, however, makes these light vehicles near impossible to go out of control on a flat roll, which I think makes it such a tempting upgrade to just always rely on the handling of the light vehicles. Next, a transport bed. So you can designate an area which you don't have to take tests to fall off when the vehicle moves. Now, this is just good for a transport. Like, there's not much to say on it. It's good when you want your guys walking around crewing or your gangers crewing vehicles like you see in high-speed car chases in Mad Max. I think put it on there, ride around in the back and shoot things out of the back as a mobile gun platform. Now, transport cage, your guys can be transported on the back. It can hold small between 1 and 3 fighters, large between 1 and 6. That's the maximum numbers that can be embarked on the vehicle. Fighters cannot start embarked if they're reinforcements. You can't be brutes or have mounted conditions to be embarked. It's treated as though they are not on the battlefield, so cannot use abilities or attack. So they can embark or disembark as a basic action. So basically it's like 40k, 30k, whatever you want, embarkation, disembarkation. And it just protects your gangers to get them about. However, as that bit of a gambling man, I think I'd be going transport bed and shooting out the back. Because who doesn't love gunning people down off the back of a high-speed vehicle? Turtle back, the vehicle doesn't automatically become wrecked if it rolls. It doesn't automatically become wrecked if it rolls due to failing. Oh, roll. I was thinking roll as in roll of the d6, but it's not. It's if it rolls over as the result of a loss of control test. It instead loses 2 hull points and automatically rights itself, resolving the roll. Weapon hardpoint, you get an extra weapon. Never a bad thing. Weapon stash counts as an ammo cache. Now, that's really good. It's better when you have a transport bed and you guys are firing out the back, so lots of people can take advantage of it. And that's it for like the base upgrades. So hopefully you can look at the profiles of those vehicles that we went over before and make your own decisions. This is all about your own creativeness. And you can now create pretty much anything you want, barring that heavy walker, which I don't think it's hard to just say, oh yeah, it's -2 movement to a heavy vehicle if you want it to be a walker. So yeah, so what would I give as an example now of a self-made vehicle? I've come up with a vehicle based on the Dakar Jet buggy that is in the Orc range. And it's a half track. So I'd actually choose the half track that's just been teased today as a Goliath vehicle, as the base form of locomotion, but I don't know whether that's going to be in the game. I wrote this before actually seeing the war compost. I'd give it the tracked. That represents the half-track nature of it. So it's -1 move. A medium vehicle, movement 5. It would have gas promethium engine as it belches promethium over people as it goes past. A gliss injector, so that one turn, the pilot, let's call him rather than driver, engages the jet and just races forwards. It has speed fins for +1 movement, so it's back to movement 6. A weapons hardpoint on the body, though, as I said, this is just my interpretation of it. Then the weapons hardpoint allows it to have 2 heavy stubbers as a medium vehicle rather than 1. And that's the, what are they, big shooters on the actual model, but heavy stubbers for our purposes. And that, I think, just captures what I felt from that model. Everyone's going to have their own opinions on what every model should have as their upgrades, and this set of rules are an absolute triumph because they let you come up with that as the player rather than being forced into one mold of what the vehicle is. So finally, a boarding ramp. When the vehicle is fitted with a boarding ramp, a fighter attempting to jump to another vehicle within 3 adds 1 to its initiative check. So high-speed chases, jumping onto the ridge hauler, getting rid of those promethium caches that I told you shouldn't be in the game or should be arbitrator-based. This is going to allow you to jump on there and wreck the vehicle. Body spikes. A vehicle fitted with body spikes. Anytime a fighter moves on a vehicle fitted with body spikes, must make an initiative check. If they fail, they suffer a strength 3, damage 1 hit. The attack does not pin them. Now, I would have really liked this to be additional damage when you ram someone. Sadly, it's not. It's about moving about on top of the vehicle, so you can't do the... I saw someone a couple of years ago did a really good Ridge Runner conversion for Ash Waste Nomads when that wasn't a thing in the game. And they had the Ridge Runner with spikes and it looked excellent. And I think that's how I'm going to do my Ridge Runner. But I want to ram people with that rather than them moving about on the top. Booby-trapped fuel tanks. If a vehicle is fitted with booby-trapped fuel tanks, is wrecked, roll a d6 for every time a fighter moves within 3 inches of it. On a 5+, the vehicle explodes. Every modeler within 5 inches takes a strength 6, AP -1, D1, damage 1 hit with the blaze trait. I like this as... I'd like it as a card, something that you can put on situationally at the start of the game. However, when it's always got the booby-trapped fuel tanks, I don't think I'd take this as an upgrade. The caltrop launcher, you may make the following action, lay caltrops basic. The vehicle moves forward in a straight line up to its movement characteristic. No turns can be made. At any point during its move, up to 3 markers can be placed within the vehicle's rear arc and within 1 inch. Anytime a vehicle with the wheeled special rule moves within 1 inch of a caltrop marker, they must take a loss of control test at -2. This is 20 credits. I don't think it's worth 20 credits because at any point during their move, a wheeled vehicle can turn. So in these high-speed chases, you just move around it. I know that it might come situationally useful if you're right at the back of the board and you drop one in front of someone, so then they move sideways and then get taken off the board by the rolling road. But other than that, I don't think it's worth 20 credits. Now, at the end of this video, I might say what I think one of the rules should be about vehicles. I'm gonna, because I can't help but give my opinion. Classic Max, I forgot to actually say what I said I was going to say at the end, which is what I think should be added to the vehicle rules. I think vehicles should be forced to move forward by a certain amount every turn unless they were previously stationary. And you have to perform a brake basic action as one of your actions to stop that. Now, I think that would make caltrop launchers and mine layers really useful for getting in front of someone, laying a mine, or going across them in a T, like crossing the T, laying a mine. And I think it would add the feeling of speed to these vehicles a lot more. It's maybe something worth trying out if you're running your own skirmish games, campaign, things like that. It's something I'd recommend. And I will get back to the timeline where I didn't have a hat on and the screen was on. Now, sorry. Sorry, guys. The flare launchers, you get launch flare basic action. All models within 12, including this vehicle, gain the reveal trait. I think photo goggles are better than that. I wouldn't take flare launchers. Headlights, you can turn them on and off at the start of their activation. So this isn't an action, which I think makes it better than flare launchers. They remain in state until their next activation. While they're on, all models within 12 inches in line of sight and in the front arc are revealed. In addition, the vehicle is also revealed. Kill switch. If the vehicle is wrecked, subtract 1 from the lasting damage table roll. Needed on every single vehicle that you take, I would say. Just because that lasting damage roll is so critical that your vehicles are going to get wrecked. Anyone that goes into a campaign thinking your vehicles aren't going to get wrecked, you're lying to yourself. Take this. Mine layer, the vehicle moves forward, it's like the caltrops, and places a melter trap within 1 inch of the vehicle arc. And that's 35 credits. You lay 1 mine, and you can purchase extra mines for 20 credits each. Again, it falls into the same category as caltrop launchers. You can just move out of the way too easily for this. Smoke launchers, now these are excellent, excellent, excellent. Launch smoke basic action, play 3 markers within 2 inches of the vehicle. They act like smoke grenades. This increases the survivability, as I've said before, of so many vehicles, your fighters on foot, everything. So I think this is a key upgrade when you're really playing the game. So, wheel spikes, wheel scythes. A model fitted with wheel scythes that moves within 1 of another model. That model takes strength 3, AP dash, damage 1 hit. If they're your fighter, they are pinned. So that includes fighters with the mounted condition. This is sort of what I wanted body spikes to be, except running people over. Though I suppose if you run people over with wheel scythes, you have moved within 1 inch of them. So you can ram them at additional effect, I suppose. So this is actually what I'd use if my vehicle had body spikes on, even though it's not the right name. That's my end of my vehicle section, really. Let me know what you think about it. I struggle to do this because even with 5-6 games with vehicles behind me, there's such a new thing to Necromunda. And a bit that I really like. I've not played the rolling road scenario yet. I think I want to get that on film for you guys when I do. Tell me what you think. So if you want to see more of this content, click the like button. Keep commenting below, as I've said, get the conversation around this topic going. I'm really interested in it. I want to talk about it. Click subscribe. It really helps me to know what you guys want to see, because when I can see on the video analytics that people have done it after this video, I know that you guys want to see it then. So that's why I bang on about this. That will help me see that you guys want Ash Waste content. I really want to play more games. If you want to come on the channel and play Necromunda with me, write in, because I'm really up for that. We're going to start a new campaign in about a month's time, which I'll get all videoed. It's not going to start out being Ash Wastes, but we're going to have a first phase being in an unexplored area, then a second phase being in sort of an Ash Waste transport phase, and then the third will be non-planned out and see what happens with the story arcs of the players. So I'll do another video focusing on what that campaign is, maybe me and someone else talking about it, me explaining it to them asking questions. And yeah, I really hope you like the content. The last thing I've got to say is I got this book from Monstrous Light Games, which are actually about 100 meters from the studio. And I really wanted to thank them because they always get me this on time so that I can give you guys a review like I did the Ironhead Prospectors on the day of release. And they've been getting me these books in good time so that I can do that. So a massive shout out to them, guys. If you were in the Great Manchester area, go and check them out. And they've said that they're getting an online store. And when they get that, I will let you guys know. So thank you for watching my review. And I will see you guys next time. In a bit.